If I were to ask you, what is Idaho famous for, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Most people would say potatoes, but they'd be wrong. It's actually crystal meth. And judging by the wedding I just went to, it is still in high demand. This might surprise you folks, but I don't get invited to a lot of weddings. Probably because I'm under the same impression as Rick.
Weddings are basically funerals with cake.
So, needlessly said, it's a surprise when I get an invitation. As it so happens, I had to go back to Idaho for such an occasion. Now, as to the couple in question, I was what you would call a close acquaintance, so I didn't plan on going. However, one of my close friends got invited too, so we agreed that we should both go so we could catch up and etc, etc. And I'm gonna foreshadow something here and say that he knew the bride and groom way better than I did. I also want to acknowledge that this is two people's special day, and the story I'm about to tell you, spoiler alert, is not favorable, to put it mildly. And it's not lost within me, okay, that to mock a wedding is in bad taste. Like, it's this poor girl's perfect day, and here I am, and actually, you know, hold on one second. Oh my God, they got divorced. Oh my God. A moral dilemma averted, everybody. One man's misfortune is another man's opportunity.
Tough break, nigga.
I just wonder who cheated on who. Oh God, sorry. $20 says it was the guy. Okay, yeah. I'll shut the fuck up and get in the story now. So I get to Idaho, meet up with my buddy, we get an address, and we carpool to the wedding. Now, if you don't know, once you get far enough out into the boonies, they stop using street names and they just have a number and a direction, like 3000 east. And it's mostly in agricultural areas. Since my buddy and I grew up in that area, we were pretty familiar with the landscape, and we didn't think to double check the address. That was our first mistake. So we plug in the address to Google Maps and we finally arrive in a field, completely empty, in the middle of nowhere. For the next 30 minutes, we are just searching square after square acre for this wedding. We were lost in the middle of nowhere and on a deadline. After a while, we see a car, which for the area that we were in is actually pretty rare. So we assume that they must be going to the wedding too, so we follow them. That was our second mistake. It's going well until the car ahead of us starts double backing and making all these random turns. And then the car stops. Out steps what I can only describe as a good old boy. Just the homegrown hero. And he looks fucking pissed. Nationally speaking, nobody gives a fuck about Idaho, which I get it. However, if you tragically happen to be there for some reason, you should know that everybody is packing. Even the super white liberal chicks, they're packing too. So this pissed off redneck starts walking towards us, just screaming about tailing him. It was at this point we just accepted that we were about to be murdered. Thankfully, my buddy clears it all up. He explains to him that we weren't stalking him, that we were lost, and that we just thought he was going too. So now everybody's in good spirits. We didn't get murdered, thankfully. And this guy was actually pretty nice. He was some like distant relative, so he took one for the team and then called like the wedding party and got actual directions. Now, I am a very punctual person, so I'm never fashionably late. I'm either absent or early. But I got the last laugh this time. Emphasis on last laugh because there weren't very many to follow. Despite all of our shenanigans, we get there on time, and by golly, you want to know where it was? In a field. In the middle of nowhere. So we get out of the car and we are immediately greeted by the smell of shit. Apparently, they had just put some manure down in like the surrounding fields, and judging by the smell, they put some in our pasture too. Now, for the last 20 minutes, all I have been thinking about is, will they have an open bar? Liquor laws are fairly strict in Idaho. There's an expression, there is no such thing as Southern Idaho, just Northern Utah. Because, you know, Mormons. So I turn into an alcohol bloodhound. I'm just trying to smell anything other than shit, looking for booze. No luck until I see this guy holding the beer. I only got to, hey man, where did you get that beer? Before I was silently interrupted by him taking a huge slug of his beer and just pointing, all without making any eye contact. He actually might be my hero. But I'm confused. I don't see anything, so I go to investigate. And I find it. All 25 feet of it. Now, if you're confused, don't worry, I was too. You see, it wasn't an open bar, but more of an open trough. They had stocked a trough of ice, Bud Light, White Claws, and Coors Light. And this was before the whole Dylan controversy, so they were chugging them. And the Bud Light rep must have been there because there was this morbidly obese middle-aged woman with a fluorescent red Budweiser shirt. Now, this girl didn't look like a hippie, but she must have been a bra burner because, Jesus Christ, swing low, sweet chariots. On that note, as a guest, what would you say is appropriate wedding attire? Semi-formal, business casual, right? Wrong. It wasn't semi-formal, it was anti-formal. And here I am with black slacks, a mahogany button-up, and a sports coat, looking like a total fucking asshole. What can I say? Sometimes looks aren't deceiving. I mean, it's not like the groomsmen are gonna have an identical ensemble. Mistake number 3. Now, I said identical, but that's a little bit of an exaggeration. See, I was wearing a sports coat, whereas the groomsmen were wearing camoed hunting vests. I will say, I did enjoy the flour they put in their lapels, even though it was plastic and in a spigot, which the irony just melts my brain. Idaho. Finally, the wedding starts getting off the ground. We are, no pun intended, herded into a different part of the pasture. Now, the wedding party clearly expected most people wouldn't show up, but in some weird cosmic Plinko chain of events, everybody showed up. At least that's my guess, because about 2/3 of the guests had no place to sit down. Meanwhile, I looked drunk as fuck because they had just tilled the ground and I couldn't find my footing. The layout for this wedding was they had the chairs, right, or lack thereof, and then they had a canopy where the bride and groom were gonna say their vows, and then behind that was a coop. Idaho. If for some masochistic reason you decide to visit Idaho, you'll notice that everything there is just old. Everything has a purpose to use. It's very utilitarian. The buildings being old is actually pretty cool from like a historical aspect. But again, we're not talking about a cathedral. We're talking about a coop that was built at the turn of the 16th century. This will be important in just a second. So now the moment of truth. The bride steps out of the trailer. If I didn't mention it already, the bride was getting ready in like a 50s style aluminum camper, which is actually kind of cool because 50s aesthetic fucking rocks. So anyway, they start playing Here Comes the Bride, and by that I mean they play a YouTube video that's hooked up to a handheld speaker that they put on top of the hitch of the trailer. Now the weather was really nice, except occasionally there would be these gusts of wind. You remember the coupe? The bride gets about halfway down the aisle, and then one of these gusts, the wind lifts up the sheet metal on top of the coupe and then just slams it down. And it happens several more times before she reaches the altar. It quite literally looked like that scene in Black Sheep when that huge storm comes through and they're in the cabin and it just keeps lifting the roof off and slamming it down. It was exactly like that. Do you take so-and-so to be your lawfully wedded? So they're wrapping it up. They say their I do's, and then the guy behind me in this ridiculous accent, all right, that's it, let's head out. I mean, I share the guy's sentiment, but my buddy, who just fucked off as soon as we got there, is MIA. Not a big deal, right? They still gotta have cake, so I'll just meet him at the reception. That was my 4th mistake. As it turned out, they didn't really plan on having a reception. But you know what? They did bring cake. Cupcakes, to be exact, from Walmart that were expired. And you know the little bride and groom ornaments they put on top of the cake? Well, they had those too, only they were of the bovine persuasion. So instead of a man and a woman, they had a steer and a heifer. Anyway, the bride and groom must have been anxious to start making babies because they disappeared soon thereafter. And you know who else bailed shortly thereafter? My ride. He got so caught up with the bride and groom that he just forgot I was with him. It was our Home Alone moment. So now that you've heard this story, you'll be prepared for the standard Idaho wedding. But why should I hoard all this misfortune? In the comments, tell me your worst wedding experience, because I'm pretty sure this one can be topped. Like and subscribe so we can get into some more shenanigans.
I mean, his shenanigans are cruel and tragic.
Which makes them not shenanigans at all, really.